That's
Thank you.
absolutely fine, Simon. I did discuss this with Louise in advance that I would open up this morning, and delighted so to do. So good morning, colleague members. A little bit of a background from me, a little bit of an introduction, and then obviously hand over to Louise and Jessica, who are going to do the majority, if not all, of the presentation for you this morning. So our civil protection team sit within the Community Safety Directorate and therefore are within my portfolio. We all, as elected members, have an important role to play before, during, and after an emergency. It is important that you are aware of your responsibilities of your council under the Civil Contingencies Act 2004, abbreviated to CCA, and that you have a good understanding of your role in preparing for, responding to, and recovering from emergencies. During my operational career across the country, I've worked directly with civil protection team officers and always found them helpful, but more critically, professional, dealing with local residents who were in the middle of a crisis. In Gloucestershire, the most obvious arena to use as an example was the 2007 floods. There have been, and there will be others, and these have occurred outside of Gloucestershire, and these are issues that I've been directly involved in, and they included significant explosions, large fires that required the evacuation of residents, rail and aircraft incidents that put local communities at risk. In all of those incidents, local elected members were involved in assisting their residents. The United Kingdom government undertook a review of emergency planning following a number of large-scale emergencies around the millennium, which included fuel shortages, oh, there's something current, flooding, foot and mouth disease, and the rise of global terrorism. The existing, and this is the existing in 2000, the existing legislation was the Civil Defence Act of 1948. It was reviewed and updated, ensuring that it was suitable and sufficient for dealing with those new identified threats and hazards. It was renamed and legislation passed to support the new Civil Contingencies Act of 2004. The CCA, supplemented by a number of guidance documents, emergency preparedness and emergency response and recovery guidance, establishes a coherent framework for emergency planning and response in the United Kingdom. The Act divides responders to an emergency into two categories, depending on the extent of their involvement in civil protection work with associated duties and other responsibilities. Local authorities are classed as Category 1 responders, core responders, and have a key role to play in the planning for an emergency, the responding to an emergency, and the supporting of long-term recovery after that emergency subsides. Throughout Gloucestershire, communities enjoy a quality of life underpinned by the smooth operation of many of our essential services, such as councils, utilities, health, and emergency services, to name a few. These do not operate in isolation and are interdependent, meaning that disruption can threaten the well-being of communities and pose a threat to industry, commerce, and individual residents, in particular those who are most vulnerable. Officers from Gloucestershire County Council's Civil Protection Team are going to deliver for you today's awareness session, aimed for you to provide an understanding of civil contingency arrangements in Gloucestershire, the role of the County Council, and outline the role of elected members before, during, and after an emergency. I'm certain you will leave this session with a clear understanding of your responsibilities. Remember, in a time of crisis, your local residents are looking for your knowledge, understanding, but most critically, your leadership. Our team will provide you with the tools that you will need to deliver. Now I'm going to hand over to Louise and to Jessica. I'm going to shut up, sit back and listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Norman, for that wonderful introduction. That really kind of summarised what we're going to go through on the awareness session today, but obviously we'll delve a bit more deeper into some of the areas that were covered then. As we're not too familiar with WebEx, Laura's kindly agreed to do the presentation side for us. So are you happy to put that up now, Laura?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to turn my video off just so it helps. Bear with me.
Thank you. Just shout when we're ready to go, Laura.
Can you see that?
I can see that, yeah, there's just a little icon at the top that says something about got it.
About what, sorry?
Resize to change the video size of the number of videos. Is that something I need to press?
Yeah, we have.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
fabulous.
good. Looks good. Yeah.
Fabulous.
I'm ready when you are.
Thank you, Laura. Can I just check the recording started?
Yeah, it has.
Fabulous. Thanks ever so much. Thanks for that, Laura. So today we're here to talk about what your role is if emergencies or when emergencies occur in Gloucestershire. To start with, introductions. My name is Louise Antonova and I lead the Civil Protection Team for Gloucestershire County Council. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Jessica Howe. Want to introduce yourself, Jess?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Jessica Hall. I'm a Civil Protection Officer with the Civil Protection Team. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Appreciate how busy everyone is. So we're really grateful for you giving your time today to come and listen to our awareness session. Would you mind clicking to the next slide, please, Laura? Okay, so at the start of the session, I just want you to have a little think. You don't need to say, maybe just jot it down on a bit of paper or keep it in your mind. What you feel that your current understanding is of your role as an elected member in emergencies. And you can see the key there from 1 to no real understanding up to number 5, where you think you've got a good understanding and could explain it to someone else. So if you just have a think and jot that down. What we'll be doing after today's awareness session is sending out a feedback survey, and we'll ask you just to pop your rating on there, just so that we can make sure that what we're delivering is achieving what it needs to and helping you to get a better understanding of this area. Thank you, Laura. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so today's aim is to provide you with an understanding of civil contingency arrangements in Gloucestershire and to outline what your role as elected member is before, during and after that emergency. Have the next slide, please, Laura. And to try and achieve that, the objectives we'll be looking at today is to outline the responsibility of local authorities under the Civil Contingencies Act of 2004. That's the main statutory act that we work to, but there are a couple of statutory duties that we'll just touch upon as well for your awareness. To highlight how emergencies are managed in the county. So when an emergency happens, how do we deal with it as a county council and also working with our partner agencies across the county. And then to outline how you as elected members fit into that bigger picture to support before, during and after an incident. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? Okay, so to start with, we'll take it right back to the beginning. And I'd like just to ask you to kind of share your thoughts around what you think an emergency is. So if anyone wants to have a think and share what they feel an emergency is for us within Gloucestershire.
Flooding, pandemic.
Yeah.
Flood.
Wind, high winds, loss of electricity, power,
Pandemic.
Yeah.
gas
Climate.
leaks.
Nuclear leak.
Anything with a sort of immediate risk to life or property.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. Any more thoughts? It's quite a wide spread there, which are definitely all classed
Great.
as
Probably
emergencies.
put in notes as mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Right.
Some kind of cyber attack that cripples the council's or other vital services' ability to function.
Absolutely, and that's one of the biggest risks on the government risk register, and we've all seen the impacts that cyber attacks can have on organisations. So yeah, no, that's a really good one. Thank you.
Riots.
Riots, yep, yep. Any other thoughts? Okay, lovely. No, that was a really good reflection and information there, and quite a widespread, and it starts you off thinking how varied an incident can be. So as we know, with incidents, they all follow their own different route. They're all a different roller coaster, and we'll kind of delve in later about the framework we've got in place to work with that. But that framework does support us, but it does require thinking on your feet and on the ground sometimes as well. So can I have the next slide, please, Laura? So I think most of this was covered with your thoughts around what an emergency is, but just to give you the definition under the Civil Contingency Act, an emergency is an event or situation which threatens serious damage to human welfare in a place in the UK, an event or situation which threatens serious damage to the environment of a place in the UK, or war or terrorism which threatens serious damage to the security of the UK. So the key things in an emergency is serious threat or damage to human welfare, the environment, or the security of the UK. And I think with your reflections, you kind of covered a wide array of incidents that would all fit in with those categories. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? Okay, again, I'm going to come back and ask you if you can mention or name any incidents that you think have occurred in Gloucestershire in the past. And I'm sure a few of you would have been involved in some of them as well. So any experience or incidents that you can think of that have occurred in Gloucestershire?
Flooding in 2007, 2009.
Yeah.
Pandemic.
So I was going to say the same as Brian, flooding. Where I lived, the estate where I lived, water came over the wall and had nowhere to escape to, so it was going into properties. So.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to say, if I can come in, about the aeroplane crash. We had an aeroplane crashed into Tuffley many years ago, and I live next to an airport, so I'm always have that in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Is that the one with the aeroplane that ended up on the roof?
I think someone mentioned the pandemic. I don't think any of us will ever forget the pandemic. So obviously that's quite a significant long duration incident as well. Is there any others people can think of?
We had a stabbing, a fatal stabbing recently.
Yeah, sadly there was the stabbing in Tewkesbury, wasn't there, a couple of days ago?
Well, unfortunately, we had one in Cam, a murder. So a 15-year-old boy murdered another boy. So the outcome of that was an outpouring of understanding and grief, from the community as a whole.
Absolutely, they have very big impacts on the communities, understandably.
There's also traffic accidents and fatalities.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any others anyone wants to share? And then we'll have a little look at a list which isn't exhaustive. It's just looking at some of the ones that we've pulled out over the last couple of decades. Any others people would like to share before we have a look?
We just got one, as Terry Hale, one in Liverpool where a car broke and everything was flooded all the way down through because it's just one central road in Liverpool and it just swept right through the village,
Yeah, absolutely.
We recently, sorry, it was Paul Baker. We recently had a Severn Trent failure to the water supply, which affected quite a large part of the Cheltenham area.
And again, that touches on what Councillor Norma was saying about how we're independent and interdependent with each other, and where someone could have a failure that has a knock-on effect to communities. And this is where the partner agencies come in to manage that, and we'll look further into how that happens. Okay, now that's really useful, thank you. So can we just go to the next slide, Laura, so we can just touch on some of the incidents. Again, this is not exhaustive. This is just some incidents we've pulled out over the last couple of decades. I don't know if any of you remember the chemical service group. They had a large fire. So this is down around the Sandhurst area. This was way back in 2000, but they were storing some chemicals and some nasty stuff there that people weren't aware of. And if you see the photo on the right there, you can see that is the actual fire from the CSG group. You can see how big and how significant that was. Obviously, that caused evacuations and pollutants in the air, etc. But the following day, that area also flooded because it's right next to the River Severn, which then spread all those pollutants even further out and caused bigger and wider issues. And I know from that there's been a lot of monitoring of the grounds around there, and I believe that is still carrying on 21 years later to check the pollutants around the area there. We've mentioned flooding. I think we all know that we have our fair share of that within the county, and just dates of some of the more significant flooding that we've had. So 2000, 2007 was probably our biggest one, 2012, 2014, 2019, 2020 and 2021. And if you look at that pattern, you can see they're getting more frequent and closer together. We can be pretty prepared for the fluvial flooding from the rivers, because we have some of the biggest rivers running through the county, one of which is the River Severn, which is the longest river in England. So as that builds up further up at its starting point up in Wales, that inevitably comes all the way down. So all the kind of counties that it flows through are impacted by that flow coming down. We also have the River Wye, and the River Avon, which merges in with the Severn up in Tewkesbury. So it's a bit of a perfect storm with rivers. We can usually get some forewarning on rivers, and as they're quite large, they usually take a day or two to come up to that level, so we can hopefully start putting some preparedness in. But equally, they can take a day or two or longer to come down as well. Probably the ones that are a bit more difficult to predict and manage are the surface water flooding incidents. And again, with differing weather patterns, etc., as a result of the climate change, we're seeing a lot more of that as well. So if you see the photo there of the A40, that was Christmas 2020, when we had that widespread surface water flooding, which really caught a lot of us off guard, because we link in with the Met Office, the Environment Agency, and it wasn't really predicted to be that significant. So that did catch a lot of people off guard, and it was quite a duration for that flooding to go down. We've touched on foot and mouth, so sort of animal diseases, etc., which affect food chains. Colleagues from our Trading Standards Service get involved in that side of things as well. And obviously there's a lot of impact and psychological impact to the farmers and the communities that were in the kind of the rural communities with that. We've had chemical leaks, swine flu, again, you may remember that back in 2009. A number of fire and flood risks with different properties. As mentioned, the water outages. So we tend to get those that they seem to be quite seasonal. When one usually starts, they usually come in a row then, but that causes a massive impact because a burst water main can affect anything from 200 properties up to 10,000 properties. So there's a lot of work there with the water companies to identify our vulnerable people, to make sure that they've supplied water to their doors, to make sure we can open up bottled water stations, etc., so that we can supply that service whilst the main service is being repaired. Back in 2017, there was a liquidation of Cleve Link, which was a dom care provider, and did a lot of work with the county council. So to ensure that the customers there were looked after, a lot of phone calls were going round just to put that information in that dom care was having a few problems, and to make sure that people didn't have any serious or immediate needs that needed to be looked after. 2018, we had the beast from the east, so we had all that snow come over. Again, that has knock-on effects to travel, people being able to get to work, businesses continuing that need to deliver critical services, heating, power outages. It all has a knock-on effect to the infrastructure that we rely on every day. And we've touched on the burst water mains. We do have, fortunately, we don't have too many where we have to go to quite large scale evacuations. But I think probably one of the most recent ones was back in Cheltenham in 2020 when there was a suspected gas leak. Fortunately, it didn't turn out to be a gas leak, but as a precaution, a number of properties were evacuated and a rest centre was set up for that. As we're all aware, COVID, which is an ongoing thing, has had multiple impacts on the country and different impacts on communities. And lastly, the most recent one, the fuel supply disruption. Again, there was a lot of multi-agency work going on there to keep a close eye and monitor the impact on critical services that had to be delivered and make sure that they could continue going. So that's just a little bit of a round robin of some of the more significant incidents that have happened over the past couple of decades. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? Lovely, thank you. So we've looked at what an emergency is, so an impact on human welfare, the environment and the security in the UK. We've had a discussion around some of the incidents that have occurred in Gloucestershire itself. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Jess, who's actually going to go through, okay, what does that mean to us as a county council and what are our statutory requirements to be able to be prepared, respond and recover from incidents. So if I can hand over to you, Jess, please.
Thank you very much, Louise.
Thank you.
I'm just going to start off with a very brief overview. I'm not going to try and bore you too much with too much legislation, but just some of the key pieces of legislation that the County Council has statutory duties for preparing for and responding to emergencies under. We've already mentioned the Civil Contingency Act, which we'll come on to, but there are another couple of pieces of key legislation. And it's just to highlight really that it's not just a nice to do, it is actually a legal requirement for the County Council to meet this legislation. Have the next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. So as we've already mentioned before, the Civil Contingencies Act is the key piece of legislation that the County Council has duties under, which I'll come back to. But there are also a couple of other pieces of key legislation that the County Council as lead authority has to do emergency plans for. So one of those is the Radiation Emergency Preparedness and Public Information Regulations, which is quite a mouthful, so it generally gets referred to as REPIR. And that legislation, as it says, is to deal with any radiation incidents. Within the county, we, under the previous REPIA legislation, we had to have a off-site emergency plan in place for Berkeley site. Some of you may be aware that Berkeley was a nuclear power station, but it ceased operating in the late 1980s. Since then, it's been going through a very long decommissioning process. So there's no longer any irradiated fuel on site. They've put the reactors into something they call safe storage, and they've removed the boilers off the site as well. But we had to have a plan in place just in case there was any risk of radiation leak from some of the radioactive waste that they're storing there. But in 2017, the Office for Nuclear Regulation, who regulate the site, confirmed that there was no longer a need for a plan because the risk of a radiation leak from the site was minimal. There's just not sufficient material on the site to cause an issue for anybody living nearby. However, in 2019, the REPIA legislation was revised, and as part of that, they looked at a new risk assessment process, which meant that rather than just focusing on reasonably likely outcomes, also had to consider highly unlikely risks, but that could potentially occur. So Magnox, who are the operators for the site, undertook a very comprehensive risk assessment process. And from that, they identified that the only risk that could potentially lead to a release of radiation from the waste would be a large aircraft crashing directly onto the waste door on site, which is actually quite a small area. And the subsequent fire could potentially lead to radiation release. However, their experts calculated that even then there would be no risk to the public off-site of any radiation release. I think probably the most risk to the public in that situation would actually be from the fire in the aircraft itself and the pollutants that might arise from that. So although nothing has actually changed on site in terms of the risks and hazards since 2017, when we no longer had to have a plan, because the methodology under the new REPIA regulations has changed, it now means that we've had to reinstate a plan and have that in place. But if anybody wants, who perhaps is a member for that area, wants to know a bit more about Berkeley and the REPIA side of it, we'd be more than happy to have a chat to you outside of this session. There's also some legislation called the Major Accident Hazard Pipeline Regulations. Not sure if you're aware that there are a couple of major high pressure gas pipelines and also petroleum pipelines that travel through the county. So as County Council, we have to lead on a multi-agency plan to have arrangements in place should one of those pipelines be breached or there be any emergency from it. So one of my colleagues is currently revising that plan and we'll be looking to test that with multi-agency partners later this year. For those of you who might be district councillors as well, just to highlight that district councils also have a responsibility under the Housing Act to provide accommodation for anybody who might be unintentionally homeless. So that could be because they're evacuated, or it may be that they're stranded in severe weather. So whilst as a county council we will support with that, it is actually the district council's duty to provide accommodation. So that might be bed and breakfast, it might be a hotel, or in larger scale incidents, as Louise mentioned with the Cheltenham gas potential gas leak, it could be to set up a rest centre. So just to make you aware, there is that added duty for district councils. Could I have the next slide, please, Laura? Thank you. Thank you. So coming back to the Civil Contingencies Act, which has already been mentioned, I think as Councillor Norman mentioned earlier, That came into force in 2004 following the national emergencies, the foot and mouth, the flooding and the fuel crisis, which highlighted that the previous arrangements just were no longer fit for purpose. So that Act established a clear set of roles and responsibilities for everyone involved in emergency preparedness and response at a local level, but to ensure that it was consistent across the UK. Under that Act, it categorises responders into two groups. So the core responders or Category 1 responders, that includes local authorities. So county and district councils are both Category 1 responders within their own right. It also obviously includes the emergency services, NHS organisations, the UK Health and Security Agency, that's the new name for what was Public Health England, and then also the Environment Agency and Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, and sets some duties for those Category 1 responders, which we'll come on to in a minute. Also, the Category 2 responders, which are cooperating agencies, so that includes the utility companies. It's already been mentioned about water supply incidents, power cuts. That's when it's important that we work very closely with those utility companies to respond. Also, transport companies and infrastructure providers, so train, railway operators, airport operators. Obviously, we've got Gloucestershire Airport within the county, and harbour authorities. Again, we have Sharpness Docks and Gloucester Docks, which the harbour authorities are involved in. Also National Highways, which is the new name for Highways England, so who manage the motorways and some of the trunk roads, and the Health and Safety Executive. So those are the Category 1 and 2 responders. If I could have the next slide, please, Laura, thank you. So just coming on to what the statutory duties are for Category 1 responders, there are 7 main duties. One of those is to undertake risk assessment. So that's done via the Local Resilience Forum as a collective, which we'll talk a bit more about the Local Resilience Forum later. And that's based very much on the government's National Risk Register, which they review every couple of years. So we look at all of those risks and how they apply to Gloucestershire. And then linked to that, there's also a duty to publish a community risk register. So that's looking at those risks assessments and putting it in a format that's appropriate for the public. So currently in Gloucestershire, we've been doing the risk assessments, and the next stage will be then to develop that public community risk register. And that's likely to be made available on the Local Resilience Forum website later this year. There's also a duty to plan for emergencies. We've already mentioned a couple of plans in terms of having one for Berkeley and major accident hazard pipelines. But the Local Resilience Forum has about 30 plans, I think it is, for all different types of emergencies. So some of those are specific. So things like animal disease that Louise mentioned earlier, obviously flooding. But there are also some more general plans to deal with any incident. So there's a major incident plan, communications plan, and a recovery plan that can be put into place if need be. Key to responding to any incident, but also for planning, is that organisations cooperate and share information, that we don't just work in silos. So again, that's a duty to do that. And again, key to any incident really is always communication between partners, but also to the public. So again, there is a duty to make arrangements to warn and inform. And then local authorities are lucky because we get an added duty to promote business continuity to local businesses and voluntary agencies. Apologies, I missed out that Category 1 responders have a statutory duty to have business continuity plans in place. So all of the county council services have to have a plan in place, and that's to ensure that they can maintain their most critical parts of their service if there's any sort of disruption. So obviously we've seen recently, obviously with COVID, when we're working mainly from home, or whether it's the fuel issues recently, or as was mentioned earlier, if there's any sort of cyber attack or IT issue that could affect the county council, we can't just shut up shop. We need to be able to continue to deliver all of our services to the public. So that's a requirement to have business continuity plans. But in terms of local businesses and voluntary agencies, they're not required to have a business continuity plan, but we do have to try and promote that to them. Obviously nowadays businesses have to meet so much other legislation, and a lot of them, particularly with COVID, are just trying to keep their heads above water. So it is quite a challenge to encourage them to have business continuity plans in place, but we do provide information on the LRF website, and there's also a business continuity forum that some of the key business representatives belong to. Each category 1 responder is required to meet all of those duties, but most of them are done collectively via the local resilience forum. If I could have the next slide, please, Laura, thank you. So coming on now to how emergencies are managed in Gloucestershire. So that's the legislation that we have to meet, and we'll come on now to how we actually achieve that. So could I have the next slide, please, Laura? Thank you. So the Local Resilience Forum, or the LRF as it often gets referred to, they're based on police areas. So within Gloucestershire, we're quite lucky because it is just based on Gloucestershire, whereas some other LRFs cover much wider areas and a number of counties. So it can get a bit more complex and a lot more agencies involved. So West Mercia LRF, Thames Valley LRF, they cover multiple counties. Whereas I think in Gloucestershire, we really do benefit from getting to know each other and working well together, which is hugely beneficial when there is actually an incident taking place. We need to pick up the phone, ask for any support. We often know who we're talking to on the other end of the phone, which is really helpful. So the Local Resilience Forum is the vehicle that's used to plan and prepare for emergencies. So it's made up of the Category 1 and Category 2 responders we've mentioned. So you'll see some of them on the diagram there. And it's made up of various groups. So there is a strategic group that meets 2 or 3 times a year, where the chief executives, strategic leaders will meet to provide that governance and strategic overview for the LRF. But then there's also something called Working on Thursday, or the WAT group, and that meets monthly. So there'll be representatives from every agency, and they will meet to discuss risk assessments, plans, what training's required, and work collectively on those matters. And then we have a number of specialist subgroups. So warning and informing mentions how critical effective communication is to any incident. So that's where the communications officers from each of the agencies, including County Council, regularly meet. And they also work very closely in response. So they have like a WhatsApp group that they can quickly put in place. There's also the Community Resilience group, which I belong to, and then the main role of that group is to provide information and advice and support local communities to develop community emergency plans. And I think Louise might mention that a bit later. The infrastructure group is made up of a lot of Category 2 responders, so utility companies, so they can work together to talk about how their response and working with other partners. And the search and rescue group, that obviously includes the fire and rescue service, police, but also some of the voluntary agencies who provide really valuable support with search and rescue. People like the Severn Area Rescue Association, Cave Rescue, Mountain Rescue, and also RayNet, who are the radio amateur volunteers who can provide support with communications if need be. And then the Human Aspects group, which Louise chairs, and the remit of that group is to look at any sort of welfare support for anybody who's affected by an incident. So that covers things like rest centres, survivor reception centres, working with the police, but also things like psychosocial support that might be needed in the longer term to support anybody who's affected. And then just linked to the LRF, there is the Local Health Resilience Partnership. For any of you who have any dealings with the NHS, you'll probably appreciate what a sort of complex organisation it is with various parts. So all of those parts of the NHS regularly meet to look at their own emergency preparedness, but then they also work very closely and feed into the Local Resilience Forum, and there's quite a lot of crossover between those groups. So that's the Local Resilience Forum. If you could have the next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the Local Resilience Forum is key to planning and preparing for emergencies. But when we actually come to responding to incidents, that's when something called command and control is activated. I'm sure many of you have probably heard before of bronze, silver and gold. That's actually a nationally recognised structure for responding to incidents, so that all agencies across the country will adhere to that structure so they understand what arrangements are in place and the process. So it starts very much from the ground up. So the bronze, or the operational response, obviously the emergency services out on the ground doing what they do day in, day out. But also from a local authority perspective, highways, if there's any sort of emergencies on the highways, they'll be dealing with those sort of day to day. If for whatever reason the incident's too big or it covers a wide geographic area, it might be that the people out on the ground need some extra support and coordination, and that's when the tactical level will be activated. Often referred to as bronze, silver and gold, but when we're dealing with a multi-agency response, we should really call it operational, tactical and strategic. And that's to distinguish because each agency might have its own internal bronze, silver and gold response. So when we're working as a multi-agency, we refer to it as tactical and strategic. So if on the ground they need support, the tactical coordinating group may be activated, and that group will have representatives from all the agencies involved. They might meet via teleconference, or more often now via video conference, or it might be in person, and often that's at the Tri-Service Centre, the building you see on the photograph where our team's normally based, Fire Service Headquarters. And in 2020, February, March, for the flooding, we had quite a number of tactical coordinating group meetings taking place in that building. And the role of the tactical coordinating group is to plan and ensure that all those responders on the ground have the necessary resources and support that they need to carry out and what they need to do. If we get a really large incident that needs strategic direction, that's when the strategic coordinating group will be convened, or multi-agency gold. And again, they might meet via teleconference, video conference, or they may meet in person at Gloucestershire Police Headquarters. And when that building was built, it was actually designed to have the ability to have a strategic coordinating group meetings there, and it's got a gold command room that's permanently there that can be used to support that response. So that will be where the strategic leads will get together, and they'll provide the strategic overview, set the intentions for how they want the emergency response to be sort of overview, and then that will then be fed down to the tactical group to actually implement that. Also, a couple of other groups might be activated. One's called the Science and Technical Advice Cell. And that's really where the experts from perhaps public health, environmental health, or depending on the incident, you might pull in other people. So if it was a reservoir incident, you might pull in your technical experts for that group. and they will get together to provide advice to the strategic coordinating group. So it's a bit like in COVID, you'll have heard of the scientists who were providing advice to the government. So they would play STAC, as it's called, would play a similar role. Obviously, as we've already mentioned, key to any emergency is communication. So the communications officers will all get together to ensure that they're keeping to standard, consistent messages, they're keeping the public informed. And obviously nowadays with social media, that's changed considerably, even since 2007 when social media wasn't such a big thing in the flooding then. They have to be a lot more reactive, a lot quicker. It's not just a matter of sort of releasing a press release now. They have to really hit the ground running on that communication. You'll see the blue box on the right-hand side that says Operation Link. That probably sounds more exciting than it is, but it's just actually a call-out process that all of the agencies can be notified of an incident and can be brought together. So any agency can request that Operation Link is activated, and then the police control room will then make those calls. So that could be used either to get people together as a heads up and share information, or it could be to convene a tactical coordinating group meeting or a strategic coordinating group meeting. It's quite regularly used. It's been an effective way of notifying people, and the police test it every month just to make sure those contact details are all up to date. So that's a multi-agency command and control. If we can move to the next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. Thank you. This slide is to show the arrangements within County Council for emergency response, which reflects the gold, silver, bronze setup that we just mentioned for multi-agency. Apologies if this slide's quite small to see, but I'll just talk through it now. So on the ground, we've got, as we've already mentioned, community resilience. So in any incident, the community themselves are vitally important. And we've seen during COVID what a valuable role communities themselves have played in supporting each other. And then obviously yourselves as elected members, the vital role you play as the eyes and ears on the ground, leading your communities and with that local knowledge to feed into the response. We then also have at County Council a number of emergency response teams, and those are made up of staff who volunteer to be part of that team. So they include the highways and logistics team. So that team will respond to any issues on the highways, whether it's flooded roads, whether it's any waste issues, property issues, if there's any county council property affected. Or that team might also be involved in sourcing equipment, helping with transport. During 2007, that team was heavily involved in trying to source portaloos to help the response. So their remit's quite wide, but a lot of what they do is sort of out and about on the ground. We then also have a welfare team, and one of their key roles is to help to identify and support vulnerable people. So we will liaise with them if there was a water incident so that we know who's vulnerable, to then feed that information back to the water company so that they can provide them bottled water. We also have a schools duty officer. So if there are any incidents that are directly affecting a school, or indirectly, if there was a large fire and the school was downwind of the plume, that duty officer can liaise closely with that school and back to the wider response to provide any advice that might be needed. Something that's been put into place for the COVID response at the County Council is a silver group, which has been really effective. Prior to COVID, we didn't really have a formal silver level of response at all. So that's something now we're looking to suggest going forward. So we're doing some work on what sort of shape that would take. And Louise we'll be taking a paper to CLT fairly soon to suggest that level is formally adopted in the council to respond to any future incidents. And then we have the gold level. So in large scale incidents, that's might need to be activated again, as it has been to oversee the COVID response. All of the county council directors are on a on-call rota. So if need be, we can get in touch with them to provide that strategic initial point of contact. They might then set up a goal group and chair that, and they also might attend the strategic coordinating group if that's activated from a multi-agency side. So as you'll see, it does follow a very similar structure. Something else as well that's in development that we've learnt from COVID is to set up a public helpline. And that will be based very much on the model that's been used for COVID, for the COVID Help Hub, that could be activated, that residents could call in if they need any sort of support in an incident. So that's something we're currently working on at the moment as well. So there's a lot of things already in place, but there's also some ongoing work to learn from incidents and ensure that our arrangements within the County Council are fit for purpose. Have the next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. Just very quickly mention about who we are as Civil Protection Team. I think Councillor Norman's already mentioned a bit in the introduction. But we, as Councillor Norman said, we come under the Community Safety Directorate. Prior to COVID, obviously we're now all working from home, but prior to COVID we were based at Gloucestershire Fire and Rescue Headquarters. And our strategic lead is the Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Jean Cole. And then Louise is our team leader, and we have 5 civil protection officers. So we're a small team, but we do obviously work with wider partners. We work very closely with district councils and multi-agency partners. Have the next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. So in terms of what our roles are as a team, we provide a 24/7 duty officer. So within the team, we have a rota and we're on duty for a week at a time. We have one single number, mobile phone number that the emergency services, district councils, other partners can call in an emergency. And then we can help coordinate any response that's needed. As it says there, we assist coordinating the County Council's response to emergencies. Most smaller scale emergencies we can tend to deal with within the team. Our duty officer will be liaising with the emergency response team managers if need be. And we will also be providing updates to other staff and to whoever is on call at a strategic level. So often we don't have to set up the silver or gold level. That's only really for significant incidents. As already mentioned, there's the Local Resilience Forum, which we support. So that's helping with risk assessments, plans. Within our team, we lead on quite a number of the Local Resilience Forum plans. So it's reviewing and testing those. We also support with training and, as already mentioned, some of the subgroups. For a number of years, we've also had service level agreements with the district councils. We've mentioned that district councils are a category 1 responder within their own right, but many of them don't have dedicated emergency planning staff. So they have a service agreement with them so we can assist them with meeting their duties. We don't have an agreement with Stroud District Council, and that's purely because they have got a full-time member of staff for emergency planning and response, but we have a really good relationship with them and we still work very closely with them on that. We've already mentioned the statutory duties County Council have, so one of our roles is to support the County Council with meeting that. So again, it's developing the plans that the County Council has a specific duty for, and then training our emergency response team staff, training the executive on-call officers. We've actually got some training for them next week. And then supporting County Council services with developing their business continuity plans. Our team also assists with that. We also coordinate something called the Gloucestershire Emergency Support Team Volunteers. And that's a scheme that's been in place for a number of years now, where we have volunteers from various recognised organisations, so people like Samaritans, Red Cross, St John Ambulance, also the clergy, and we've got quite a few retired local authority staff now who also volunteer to be part of that scheme. So they're vetted, they have to undertake an initial assessment, and then they're given regular training so that if need be, they can support district councils with staffing rest centres, but they can also support the police with survivor reception centres if need be. Within our team, we also support the Prevent duty and help coordinate the Gloucestershire Prevent Partnership Board. Not sure if you've heard of Prevent, it's part of the government's contest strategy. So it's to try and prevent radicalisation. So that board is made up of representatives from local authorities, the university, the police, and other agencies who all work together. So we help support the secretarial support to that. And then also assisting in recovery from emergencies. Once the response phase is over and the emergency services have all sort of dissipated, that's when the local authority then takes on responsibility for leading the recovery. And that could obviously vary. So for something like a water supply incident, hopefully the water's back on within a couple of hours. But for something like 2007 flooding, that recovery could take months. Or then for something like the Grenfell fire or the Manchester arena bombings, you could potentially looking at recovery and supporting those communities affected for years. So again, that's a really important role of the local authority. The next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. So hopefully that's given you an overview of the County Council's emergency response structure and what we do as a team. But I'll now hand back to Louise to talk about how your role as elected members fits into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. I'm just wondering before we go into this final part of the awareness session, if people would welcome a comfort break. Yeah, shall we say maybe 10 minutes? So we're just past 11 now. So mine says 11:02. So if we come back about 11:12.
Yeah,
okay
that's fine,
with you?
Louise. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah, all right.
See you
Cheers.
in 10.
Bye.
Thank you.
Sue, did you get through? What did they say? Okay.
Okay, I think I make that about 10 minutes now. Can I just check with Simon and Laura if they can see if we have everyone back?
Let's just have a little look now.
Thank you.
I just maybe turn off the sharing, Laura, just for a second, just to see. Yeah, I think we've got most people back. Yeah.
Fabulous, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
We just pop the presentation back up, Laura. Thank you. Lovely, thank you very much. So we've outlined today what an emergency is, our statutory responsibilities as the county council, and how we deliver under our emergency management framework within the county council. So the final part of today's awareness session is to look at what your role as elected members is in that whole framework and what you bring to the party in an incident. So can I have the next slide, please, Laura? So in an emergency, as with business as usual, elected members are not involved in the operational response that's led by the officers, but they do play a key role in leadership. And this can be put down into 3 different areas: before, during and after an incident. So before an incident, it's very much around the political leadership. It's ensuring that the council is meeting its obligations under the Civil Contingencies Act, and they're prepared to respond to emergencies. During an incident, it's very much around civic leadership, so providing a focal point for the local area during the response to an emergency situation. And then after an incident, it's very much looking at the community leadership side of things and helping your communities to become more self-resilient, and supporting them to recover from an incident. Because as we said at the beginning, no 2 incidents are the same. Some quickly happen and quickly go. Others have a more duration as how long they last, and this all contributes to what effect that has on the community. So we'll have a look at each one of those areas in a bit more detail now. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? So the first one we looked at is your role before an emergency. So would anyone like to share any thoughts on what they think their role may be as an elected member before incidents and emergencies occur? If you just like to come in, I'm sorry, I can't control the function. So if you'd like to come off mute and just say.
It's Brian Tipper.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Brian Tipper.
Thank you.
What I found, over the last sort of 8-10 years, things have changed a hell of a lot in terms of how we deal with the public. And the point I'd like to try and make is that yes, there's a balance where you not interfere, but you join in. But you're quite right that the emergency department that is dealing with a problem. It's important for a councillor to be seen to be supporting what is being said by those people, and what I've been aware of is certain councillors even contradicting what has been said. So in other words, it's very important that we play a supporting role all the way through the process, and the whole point is that we don't go against anything that's been said by the person in control of the situation.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's a really valuable point. And I think the key thing from that is we're all on the same side and we all want to achieve the same outcome, and that is to support the communities as best we can. So thank you for that.
Precisely.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any other views around what you think your role as an elected member is before an emergency?
It's Terry Hale. Mostly people will ring us first as elected members. They will ring us first, so it's us getting the information to the chief or whoever's in charge of that operation to get that in motion.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's sharing, it's all about communication, and that is another key element in responding to incidents. It's the communication between all the key players. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from anybody?
Yes, from me,
I have
please.
a question, please. It's Brian Tipper. Can you see that? How up to date is that information?
Yeah, and we'll come on to that because we've actually got stuff on members' matters, and we'll come on to that side of it.
Thank you.
Can I come in, please?
Yes, of course.
Well, in Long Levens, I was fortunate to be here in 2007 when we had the floods. Since then, we have got a designated emergency centre, and we work in partnership with other community buildings in our area. And I think that'd be useful for members to do. So actually find yourself a building that's suitable for you to evacuate people to. We have our local emergency plan, but I must say it needs updating because people come and go. I know who the key holders are, so I can get hold of them and they have their keys, you know, because it could be in the middle of the night. We also have learned from the 2007 event, we actually have emergency boxes in our storeroom in what we are designated centre is. And that has all sorts of equipment in it, things like disposable nappies, rubber gloves. You know, I could share a list with you maybe some other time, but there's a whole list of stuff in there to help people. And we check on that box every so often to make sure that the things inside it are still good and being able to use and not have gone out of date. The other thing to keep in mind is the emergency pharmacy. Because when we had the 2007 event, we had to find pills, medication for people, and that was a problem. So another point is try and get your emergency pharmacy number on your phone as well. And generally involve your community. Just don't shelve it away. Just every so often check with the people who are on your named list as your key holders that they're still happy to be there, because people do come and go. And then, you know, you come to your emergency and you find that somebody may have passed on or moved away from the area and you didn't know anything about it. So it's about keeping that update and just engaging with your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, all really valuable information, and it is very much about being engaged with your communities and knowing what their requirements are, so that you can support them as best possible during an incident. So can I have the next slide, please, Laura? And we'll just have a look at the more holistic role of the elected members before an emergency. So as we said before, it's around the political leadership, and it's making sure that your council is meeting its obligations under the Civil Contingencies Act, and that they're in a good position to be able to respond to incidents. This could involve being part of and making significant policy and funding decisions to help plan for and have those resources in to manage the emergencies. And a lot of the other things on here is very much what we've touched on today. So being aware of what the council's responsibilities are under the Civil Contingencies Act. We've kind of touched on that today, but there is further links that I'll touch on later where you can have a little bit more reading around that area. Gain an understanding of emergency planning and multi-agency response arrangements in the county. Again, Jess touched on that around what we do as a civil protection team, around the local resilience forum and that command and control structure across the county. And as we've mentioned just now, contributing, raising emergency planning awareness amongst your communities. So in community resilience plans. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because there is a lot of work that's gone on with partner agencies in the LRF to bring those tools together for communities. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? Okay, so we've looked at what the role is prior to an incident. And again, the same question, if anyone wants to share any thoughts, what they think their role is during an emergency. So if you have an emergency within your community, what do you think your role is as an elected member? Does anyone have any thoughts?
I would say sort of being aware of the vulnerable people in your area. So going back to this flood thing, there was a lot of bungalows. I went round to sort of check that the people in the bungalows were okay and things like that.
Absolutely, and you know your communities. They trust you, they know you, and you're able to be the eyes and ears of that community to feed that information back up so that services can deploy where need be. Is there any other thoughts?
Brian Tipper, what you've just said, I would endorse wholeheartedly. Being that the written word in the right place at the right time can save a lot of anxiety, worry, that type of thing. And if you create that kind of character in your community, you're well respected, and it goes a long, long way.
Absolutely, totally support that. Having a friendly face, someone you trust, is worth its weight in gold for people that are affected by an incident. Is there any other thoughts about what your role may be during an emergency?
Communication, ensuring that your community does have that relevant information.
Can I just say, I really do feel if you're confident enough, you need to take that leadership. Again, try not to do everything on your own. We secured some very good volunteers who had the skills of ex-police officer and teachers and goodness knows what else, and they ran our centre while I went out, like somebody just said, and checked on the people that I knew were vulnerable. Because if you know your patch, you know your vulnerable areas where they are. But it's not about you trying to do it all on your own. It's about getting other people to help you run the situation, because it's impossible to do it on your own. So you need to be able to get good volunteers on your side quickly to run your centre or whatever you're doing.
Absolutely, and it's understanding that link that it is a legal responsibility for the district council, if there is evacuations in place, to open up such a facility. So it's very much working with those that have the legal responsibility as well. Are there any other thoughts people would like to share? Okay, can we go to the next slide, please, then, Laura? So as we've kind of touched on in some of the thoughts that have been shared just now, it's very much about your civic leadership during an incident. So you provide a focal point for the local area during an emergency situation. And many of the points listed here of what we've touched on already. Communication link to the local community. You are a known and trusted face to them. They're going to talk to you. They're going to be appreciative of having that friendly face, talking to them and asking what their needs may be. You're the eyes and ears of that community. So, you'll be well embedded into your communities. You'll know the makeup, you'll know the requirements within the area and of any local issues that may be going on at the time of an incident, and have that local knowledge. You can make requests for assistance. And as we saw the elected members' pocket telephone guidance there, that has been updated and uploaded onto Members Matters. And I'll show you a screenshot of that a bit later on. And it very much outlines where you can go to get further information, where you can go in certain incidents. So, for example, if you have a life-threatening situation, you go to 999. So you go in the system, you're triaged, and the correct professional help will be coming quickly. Highways incidents, there's a contact number on there for highways. If it's a bigger incident and other emergencies, there's details how to contact strategic leads within the county council that you can discuss information with, and they can reach back into the responding officers to get you that up-to-date information or try and help shape the response to the communities where it's best needed. And that will help form the community leadership role and the reassurance to your communities. But in balance to that, it's also managing the expectations, because as much as we'd love to be able to come and support everyone at the same time, in an incident, that's not realistic. And it's got to be those that are most in need to start with. So it's to manage those expectations and ensure the communities that they will be supported. And attend, and if appropriate, chair any local residents forums. So if you've got an incident that's quickly happens and quickly finishes, you may not see things like that set up during the incident, But if you've got long-term flooding or incidents like we've seen with COVID, there may be local forums that residents set up, and they may ask you to either chair or attend those to keep that link between the county council, the services they may need, possibly the district council, if you're district councillors as well, and the needs of the community. So very much what we kind of outlined in the thoughts and reflections that you kindly shared earlier. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? And then finally, again, any thoughts and reflections about what you think your role may be after an emergency?
Just a thought that you might want to learn the lessons from the previous emergency, what went well, what could have been done better, so that you're better prepared for the next one.
Absolutely, and that's a really key point. Like we've said a couple of times, each emergency is different. We go on a different ride for each incident to respond to it, and there is always going to be learning, and it's really important to gather that and implement it going forwards. Thank you.
Yeah, Brian Tipper, that's a very good point, but I was thinking more of immediately after the event, and I would be looking for the want of a better word, apathy, worried people, people that have got through a situation but they can't cope. That would be the kind of thing I would be looking for and trying to assist with. It depends on when you're asking the question, what period you're talking about.
And the period can be immediately afterwards, and as Jess touched on before with the recovery, there is not always the same timeline to recovery. It could be something that people need that support quite quickly. It could be they need it for a number of weeks, months, or even years.
Yes.
So it's quite a varying timeline on that. But again, it comes back to you being that trusted person within that community, the eyes and ears of the community, the people they will communicate with and share what their needs are as well. Thank you.
I would
Sorry.
suggest that vulnerable residents should be checked after the emergency has finished to see that they've survived okay.
Absolutely, and again, the blue light services will look after immediate risk to life, etc. But yeah, it's that impact after it, and it could be simple things like, you know, people are anxious and they're worried about going out and getting their shopping, or you know, that sort of support that may impact everyday life. That people, and it does tend to happen. Everyone reacts to an incident. It's top of your mind. Then as you start to recover from it, it becomes less of a thing in your mind and people go back to their everyday life. But there will be members of the community that have been quite significantly impacted. And we've seen that so much during COVID, you know, with lockdowns, etc. People are anxious to go out, they're worried, they're nervous. And people may need that support just for everyday living. And if it's something that you've become aware of because you've knocked on their door and had a chat with them, you can hopefully put them in touch with any necessary services that may be able to support them as well going forwards. Thank you.
Could I raise a point at this point in time with regard to these emergency numbers and that type of thing? Not to take up too much time, but when I was in the police force, we had what we called standing orders, and basically, whatever the event was, you could turn up that issue in standing orders, and it would give you, say, 10 top bullet points how to deal with that situation. And what with we've all got phones now, probably that we can download a lot of things to. But frankly, to get into members' matter in an emergency situation, it can be, and you might need to have it with you at that point in time. But you're always carrying your phone. So would it be possible to introduce some kind of link that you can download to your phone and turn up standing orders in a particular situation?
That's a fair point, and again, that's something that I can chat to Simon with after this awareness session to see if that is something that can be achievable.
Simon was the person I had in my mind when I was saying it.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian, I think, yeah, potentially we could do something that sits on your phone and on the iPad that is literally an icon that you would select, and then it would bring up the latest information, and that could be updated. So, because I know we've had 1 or 2 issues in the past where the leaflet that's been circulated, and I know members value that, you know, it does get out of date over time, and members have tried to use some of the phone numbers and they've been unobtainable. And I know that's caused some frustration, but it's the nature of these things. When you print them, they do get out of date over a period of months and years. So yeah, that potentially, yeah, we can look at that, Brian. Yeah, we'll, you know, I'll chat to Louise and see what we can do. It's a good suggestion.
All I've got in my mind, and that one, Simon, very quickly, is that time is of the essence, and
yeah, I get that.
Yeah, you can't afford 2 days to find out who you've got to talk to.
Yeah, yeah. Is it worth saying at this stage, Louise, is just kind of sort of reflecting, because we had some conversations after the flooding that we had in December 2020, because that kind of identified a few issues where members very quickly, because the flooding happened in such a short period, we're talking about the 23rd and to a lesser extent the 24th of December, and members were contacted because the flooding happened so quickly within a short period of time, and we had members of the public going to their local councillors asking for help. And then we had because it happened so quickly, the emergency service and the fire service, it's inevitable in that kind of situation, they're going to be getting a massive number of calls from people where there's threat to their property, sometimes threat to life. You know, just down the road from me, I live in Hynham, and the road between Gloucester and Newark flooded in a place that it doesn't usually flood, and there were vehicles everywhere, and it was, you know, it was a very difficult situation we had. And I know 1 or 2 members who were right in the teeth of it, not actually one of the members that's on the call today. He got approached about a series of properties. They're in Turley, and they were, you know, as it turned out, they were probably the worst affected properties of the whole incident. A whole row of houses went under, or had, you know, feet of water in them, and the councillor was trying desperately to get out of the emergency services and get out of the fire service, but couldn't because of the volume of calls. So in that kind of situation, and it's worth members being aware of it, there should always, we'll have someone in democratic services that is available for you to call, and we have access, and I think Louise sort of indicated that in something she said earlier, and we've got access to the lead GCC fire officer on the ground. And that means that we can get a line of communication direct to that person. It's in those kinds of rare situations where the local member can see something happening and action needs to happen fast. You know, by coming through us, we can get to the lead officer, and they then can, you know, if they're able to take action. Whereas, you know, dialing 999, they're completely overwhelmed and you can't get through. So we have got that arrangement in an extreme situation. So, you know, it's just worth members being aware of that. Is that all right, Louise?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And we've got on the slide a bit later on just to show you some of the information that is on members' matters. But obviously me and Simon can have a chat outside this session to see if that can be made more accessible and quicker in emergency situations. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? So just to kind of finish off what your role would be after an emergency, and this is where your community leadership comes in. And it's really, like we've mentioned, looking at lessons learned, looking at the things that worked well, didn't work so well on the ground when responding to an incident. And it's helping your communities to become more resilient going forwards. It's vital all the way through, before, during and after, that you remain a key communication link between the council and the local communities. Assist your, sorry, did someone want to come in there? No. Okay, assist your communities in recovery as appropriate, and that could be, you know, by supporting meetings, by making sure they're linked into the right services, whether it be at district or at county council. The community resilience is really the key thing here, and we'll touch on it in a bit about helping communities, and as we've heard before, have their own plans in place so they can support themselves through a period of time till the professional services are there to help them with that. And finally, take part in any debriefs, inquiries, scrutinies and committees as required. So I know from the flooding that we had Christmas 2020, following that there was an environment committee that was set up, the environment scrutiny, to look at the impacts of that. And I know a lot of members sat on that and fed back their kind of learnings from being part of the response to that as well. There's also incidents that may go bigger, more significant, which may go to legal proceedings. And I don't know if anyone's been following the Grenfell inquiry, but elected members have been called into that to give evidence. And that's not just the response, but it's very much looking at your proactive work, the support on policies, the agreements on budgets, etc., that may have contributed to that incident happening, and things that happened in there. So it's just to bear that in mind, that you do have a key role in helping to shape going forwards, whether that's at a local level or potentially at a more legal-based, evidence-based level. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura?
I've been trying to ask a question, but hasn't been noticed.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it was going back to the members' communication during the emergency, or an emergency. That's really key, and I think what Simon was suggesting, having some sort of an icon on your phone or iPad, would be really useful. And what I would say, and we should probably have a conversation offline about Members Matter, is that a good place for officers not to rely on, for members to look at, is Members Matter, because in my experience, it's supposed to be an updated, it's supposed to be a bulletin to update members of what's going on and new things. At least that was my understanding of it, but there's some things on there that never change at all. So I'm really not clear what it does, and it doesn't probably get read as often as it probably ought to be. So yeah, so something for emergencies, something you know, completely bespoke, and by all means put it on Members Matters as well, but something which is easy to get to as well for emergencies, I think, would be really important.
Thank you. There's some general guidance to have a think about as well, and the absolute key is to remember your own health and safety, because there are a number of different types of incidents that bring in their own risks and dangers. So you almost always have to put your own health and safety first and look after yourself.
Can I
Yes, of course.
both ways with it, if the powers to be the leaders of that particular group, we can be an assistance to them with the information we can give, but sometimes we're not recognized as that, and more of an encumbrance than help, if you know. So I think it goes both ways, that police and officers, fire officers, know, you know, who the ward member is and so on.
Yeah, and I think that was, Terry, that was a bit of the learning from December in particular.
Yes, right.
And I've had some really good conversations with, you know, Louise, Mark Crease, Gavin Roberts, the people, you know, senior people in the fire service who recognise that you guys have got that key information on the ground. So, for instance, this is one of the things that now happens, and this comes via Louise's area, is whenever we have, you might have seen, you know, I'll send you out the update on the weather if there's some adverse weather expected, and I think I did that earlier in the week. So that comes via Louise's team. So if I see, you know, potential for flooding in Gloucestershire, I'll send you all the email. I don't send you all of the ones that come through from the civil protection team, but I do send you that. And then, and Paul would have seen, because I don't know, and Roger, as Cheltenham member, Paul referenced the issue in Cheltenham where there was a big issue in terms of water not being available for a lot of properties. When Louise's team sent the update out to say, actually, we've got this problem, and then there were updates every hour or so for a period of time while we were right in the teeth of that issue, I was sending that to all the Cheltenham members to keep them up to date. And I have incidents, and sometimes it might be in the Cotswolds or the Forest of Dean, when something, you know, there's a water main that's gone, those sort of things. I will contact that member. So, for instance, I think it was the start of last week, Mark Mackenzie Charrington he represents Stowe in the surrounding area. There was a fairly major outage in his area, and I was able to get in touch with him and keep him updated. So we've got some really, I think we've got much better communication channels now than perhaps we might have had a year ago, and that's thanks to Louise and the team, because they used me as that conduit to get information to you guys. Because you're right, Terry, sometimes you know stuff on the ground that the emergency services are not necessarily aware of. You know, if a particular property is vulnerable and what has happened in the past to prevent that property being flooded. So you're bit of it, you know, the information you can provide is absolutely critical.
Yeah, you're bang on, Simon. That's right. Yeah.
Do you have anything to identify yourself as councillors, maybe a tabard or something? So if you are not on the ground, that the emergency services can recognise that?
Yeah, we do. We have got tabars. We have, you know, and badges and so on that goes, you know. So we have got that ability to do that. But it's sometimes, and you can understand it if it's a situation. But as Simon said, we know little quirks that we can get, you know, different things done, and we know people that's got 4-wheel drives or you name it. We got it. You know.
Yeah. Oh, another example we had not so long ago. It was a very bad road accident. And the fire officer on the ground, who, you know, attended the scene, the senior fire officer at the scene sent a message to me, and I was able to get to the local member so that they were aware that had just happened. So, you know, there's some really, I think there's some, and I think if you make, whether you're wearing a tabard or not, if you make yourself known, to the fire officer, the senior fire officer there, they know your role. They will understand that.
Yeah.
In terms, because you can help them in terms of managing. Sometimes it's managing the community expectation, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And your knowledge of your communities, they're worth their weight in gold. It's really
I think
to the response.
Yeah, I feel it's a priority, really. As Simon said, you know, I've introduced myself to the fire. You know, Roger Pickett is our fire officer in Colford. He knows me where and he'll always ring me. You know, so there is that communication, but that's what I've done on my own kind of thing. You know, so as if there's anything happens, he can ring me, and I can help him as best I can.
And I would encourage as many elected members as possible to attend the Community Safety Directorate members awareness session. I believe it's the 19th of November. So the fire service will be there, ourselves will be there, trading standards and the coroner's service. We all come under the same directorate, but it gives you a chance to make those links and have those conversations face to face as well.
Yeah, certainly.
Could I bring something up, Brian Tipper? I'm just reading your paragraph below. Members will be notified of an emergency as soon as practical to do so. I'd like to challenge that statement in that it can be reversed. In other words, sometimes a member is aware of an emergency situation, and that should be like a two-way street. We can be helpful in that direction.
No, absolutely agree with that. And yeah, that probably needs a little bit of rewording on that, but it is, they don't always come through from the same source. So it is very much, I suppose from our side, it's once we're notified of something, we'll let you know as soon as possible. But obviously if you know of stuff, obviously you notify the necessary services. Yeah, it's totally a two-way communication.
That's the point that Terry, I think, was trying to raise, and I just think that's a bolt on to what he was saying.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. Just touch on a couple more points under general guidance. So big significant incidents and major incidents are usually followed by a period of confusion because it takes time to get the services on the ground and get a picture of what's going on. So it's just to ask for people's patience while we try and gather that information. Once we do have that information, as Simon said, it is shared out, and it is shared out to the necessary councillors so they're aware of what's going on. And as Brian mentioned as well, that is a two-way communication flow as well. So if there's information coming through, Simon can call through to us and we can become aware of that and alert partner agencies as well. And as we mentioned before, as we go through incidents, my team collate what we call a common information picture, and that is circulated out to key partners across the county council, one of which is Simon, and he will share that information out to the necessary councillors so that they're aware of the situation that's going on and get the updates from that as it progresses through the response. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? As with the general guidance, there's also a little bit of guidelines around some pitfalls to avoid. Never ever put yourself in danger, because if you put yourself in danger, it's going to affect yourself and you're not going to be able to help your community as well. So always look after your health and safety and never put yourself in danger. As we've already touched on, when the blue lights respond or the highways officers, etc., stand back and let them get on with their job. There is always someone that is leading the lead on the ground, who will be stood back for you to be able to communicate with, so they can then communicate that with their responding teams. So never get in the way of the response, stand back and find that necessary officer who you can have that conversation with. Never take on any tasks you're not comfortable with. Any liaison with the media should always go through the communication team at the county council. And this one kind of links into that. You should never make any statements that imply failure or blame of the council or other organisations. And I think somebody mentioned that earlier. The communication needs to be collective because it is on behalf of the county council. So it needs to go through the county council communication teams. And again, as we said at the beginning, don't put yourself in danger. The end bit there links into that. Make sure you look after yourself and you have adequate breaks and rest. We've all done it. It's so easy in response. You just keep going because you want to help. You want to make things easier for people, but you do need to recognise when you need to take a break and have a rest as well. Have the next slide, please, Laura. Just a couple of slides to go now. Okay, as we've had a little bit of conversation around where some of the further guidance is, so you can see the kind of diagram on the left there. That's kind of the guidance that we put on after the incidents, the flooding incidents around Christmas, onto members' matters, just to give you a bit of direction on where to go to get further support and information. We've also put on there a copy of the Are You Ready booklet. This was produced from the Community Resilience LRF subgroup, and it was given out at safe and well visits by fire service personnel. There's downloadable copies on it of the LRF website. Unfortunately, due to funding, there wasn't enough to print, so we can put them out in lots of different areas in Gloucestershire, and that's why we popped it on the website as well, so people can download and print it. There is so much useful information in there to help communities to be more resilient, really useful information about key contact numbers for utility companies and other key partner agencies that the public can go to themselves, and you can use as well to be able to get further information of things that are affecting your community. So I know you're going to have a chat with Simon about the Members Matters stuff, but I would really encourage all members to have a look at that and really have a look at the Are You Ready booklet as well. In addition to that, and again, we'll list these on the feedback form so we can gauge members that will be interested in any further training. My team can put together a scenario-based discussion exercise if members would find that helpful, and we can pose a scenario and we can discuss and walk through what your roles may be in that scenario. We can arrange a meet and greet for the civil protection team. So if members would be keen to do that, to meet all the team and listen to all the different areas that we're involved in. We've kind of done a summary of it today just due to time reasons, but if you find that helpful, we're more than happy to do that as well. And one of the big key areas that we've looked at is around community resilience, and the Community Resilience Group under the Local Resilience Forum have done a lot of work recently, and that's just starting to come to conclusion now, on pulling together guidance documents and templates which communities and parish councils can use to be able to pull together those community resilience plans. Jess, I don't know if you want to come in and just say a little bit more around that, because that was kind of your baby you were working on.
Yes, thank you. No, we've based it very much on the government guidance that came out a year or so ago on community emergency plans. So those are just being finalised now and will be available on the LRF website, but we will be doing some promotion about that. We're also looking to run a couple of online workshops, which parish and town councils will be invited to, but as elected members, you're more than welcome to attend as well. And those will just be to take people through that community emergency plan template and guidance and talk a bit more about community resilience. So hopefully we're looking to arrange those now, but they should hopefully be coming up before Christmas. So we will make you aware once we've got the dates and the arrangements in the diary. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Can I have the next slide, please, Laura? So there's just some links on here to some further reading that you may find interesting, just to kind of widen your knowledge and information around the world of emergency management. There's a local government association guide, a councillor's guide to civil resilience, which gives a lot of good information. You've got the local authorities preparedness to civil emergencies guide. It very much outlines issues that local authorities should consider in order to be prepared to respond to emergencies. It's primarily written for chief executives, but it is a really useful guide for elected members to understand those frameworks and requirements as well. Have the next slide, please, Laura. The life cycle of an emergency, and this is really a good guide with some case studies in it. So there's stuff around the Manchester Arena bomb attack, around some wide-scale flooding that happened in Suffolk as well. So it just gives you some of those case studies and responses and recoveries from there. There's links on there that you can look further into the Civil Contingencies Act and the preparedness guidance and non-statutory duties that come with that as well. So if you wanted to have a further read in there, all the links are on there that you can click in and have a look at. And can I have the next slide, please, Laura? And as we've mentioned, the Local Resilience Forum for Gloucestershire, their website is Gloucestershire Prepared. So that's got the link on there. Very worth going in, having a look at the information that's on there. That's a public facing website. And as Jess said, we'll be uploading the information and tools around community resilience to help the communities. But there's also a lot of good information and useful tools around household emergency plans, around business continuity for businesses. So I think it would be really useful if you're able to kind of promote that out into your communities, by both residents and businesses, because there's some really good helpful tools on there that can help people. And can I have the next slide, please, Laura? Okay, and just finally, like we've done a whistle-stop tour really around emergency management today, and hopefully you found it useful, and it's kind of opened the world up to you about, you know, the kind of work that goes on within the county. But I've just included a checklist on here that you may find useful for your own assurance around your knowledge of the subject area. And that's really a lot of the stuff we've gone through today, and you've got links if you wanted to gain some further information about it. So it's you have a clear understanding about what the Civil Contingencies Act is and what it covers. You know what is meant by an emergency as defined in the Civil Contingencies Act. You know what a Category 1 and Category 2 responder is under the Civil Contingencies Act. You know what the role of the Gloucestershire County Council is under the Act as a Category 1 responder. You have an understanding of what your role is as an elected member before, during and after an emergency. You're aware of and know who the makeup of the local resilience forum is. You know who the council's civil protection team is. Obviously, you've met two of us today, but we're more than happy to do a session to meet the rest of the team if that would be useful. And you've considered what steps you can take to help promote preparedness and resilience activities within your communities. Again, we've given you lots of links to different tools and information that's available. And as Jess has touched on, there'll be a lot more work coming out and webinars that communities can participate in, and yourself as elected members around community resilience planning. And can I have the final slide, please, Laura? I think there's one more after this, actually. So as we did at the beginning of this session, asked you to have a think about what you felt your current understanding is as your role as elected members. Again, just to have a re-evaluation of that, having gone through the awareness session, and it'd be really helpful if you could jot that down on the feedback form, just so that we can gauge whether what the content of this is useful and is giving you the information and tools you need, and signposting you to sort of areas where you can gain further information. And it just helps us to shape it going forwards to make sure that we're helping you in your role as elected members in emergencies. And then can I have the final, I think it's the final slide now, please, Laura. Yeah, it is. Thank you. So it just leaves me to say thank you. Thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you for everyone that supported to bring this presentation together, deliver it, introduce it, and do the technical side. Really appreciated. Thank you for all of you for sparing 2 hours of, I know, what is very busy time for you to come and have a listen to us, and I hope you found it useful. Like I said, we'll be sending out a feedback form. The recording of this will be on Members Matters as well. And again, if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask us, you can contact us on the email below. You can pop it on the feedback form. I'm conscious that we've just come up to 12 o'clock now, but I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any, or equally we can answer them after the awareness session. So I will be quiet now and wait and see if anyone does have any questions at this stage.
Thanks, Louise. Just with it, Laura's just taken, she's ahead of me, she's already taken the slides down. It's a really useful session. I don't know, Roger, you still got your hand up. Is that from before? We couldn't see hands.
Sorry, that should have been taken down. From...
That's all right, that's fine. I don't know if, Dave, did you want to say
yes, please,
Simon,
yes, obviously, it's absolutely fantastic when members of your team put together a presentation like you've had this morning. And I'm absolutely amazed, Louise, that you managed to get it spot on 2 hours and still gave us a 10-minute comfort break. So that's another point for you in respect of the professionalism, the dedication and the commitment that you, as a small team, continue to drive across Gloucestershire County Council. I'm so proud of the work that you do. I'm so proud of you as a team, and I know some of you were awarded some for your recognition of what you did in the COVID crisis, and long may that continue in respect of the work that you can continue to do. A small team, a fantastic team, and you've already done something else for me, which I'm absolutely delighted. You've raised the issue of the 9th of November, which is the full Community Safety Directorate presentation day, the Members Awareness Day. You and the team will be down there. So colleague members and we've got a large number of members signed up, county and district members coming to that. So they will be able to see you face to face and maybe keep some of those questions for that day. And the Chief's even providing us with lunch. So what more could we want? So I'm looking forward to the 19th. And I really want finally just to say a fantastic thank you for what you've delivered. And I know members will leave this with a lot more information. Hope they don't have to use it, but we all know that crises do occur. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to Louise. Thank you, Simon.
Dave, has anybody else got any, just before we round up, then any questions from men? But hopefully you're reassured that, you know, we have got some pretty decent arrangements in place to keep you well informed. And I think something that you might pick up, and I get a bit of noise at district level, is that district councillors may well come to you because they can't get hold of people in their own council. And this was a particular problem in the run up to Christmas. There just weren't any, there wasn't anyone available. But you know, come through me. You know, if I don't pick the email up quickly, Stephen will. So there's two of us, and we both of us are kind of sad enough to be checking our emails every evening just to see what's coming in. So we should be able to get in touch with you reasonably quickly, and that's how it's proved when we've had particular incidents that have affected, you know, a single member. We've managed to get something out. And often you as the local member haven't been aware of it, but Louise's team has got it across to me and we've got it out. And that means you're well informed. So when the district councillor calls or the parish councillor, you know, I know you're at the top of the food chain in terms of you're expected to know. So we'll do our utmost to make sure you know what's happening.
Simon, could I come in there? And I would like to commend your staff. My particular contact member, I tackled her with a situation yesterday. She wasn't beside her computer, but within 20 minutes, half an hour, I had the answer I wanted, and I was able to liaise with my parish council that night with the problem concerned. But please convey to your
thanks, Brian.
As they are, and it's way better than Stroud District Council.
Thank you. I won't comment. I know, but to be fair to the districts, resource-wise, they don't have the people, and it's to be fair, it's a struggle. It is a struggle sometimes to do some things. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate you turning up, and it'll be available afterwards to look if there's anything you wanted to check up on. All right. And we're going to make available, you know, the pocket. The leaflet, we've got a new one of those, Louise, is that right? We're going to make available at some point?
We haven't developed anything at the moment. I think we need to have a discussion. And I think we can put that on the feedback form, whether we do the icon to the link to members matters, because we don't want too many, because it's better to have one.
I know members quite liked, it was kind of credit card sized. They really liked that. But I think it's important that it comes with a health warning that, you know, numbers change. So if there's a link on it to, you know, you look this up, then I think that could still work.
We can have a chat
We'll have
about
a
that.
chat.
Yeah, it
We'll have a
depends what the link is from members' matters, like we were discussing earlier, for
Yeah.
quick access. So we can see the best way to work that.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Okay. Thanks very much. All right. Cheers.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye bye.
Thank you.